Stan Rogers is a Canadian singer-songwriter, born in southern Ontario, but associated mostly with the East Coast. And one of his most famous songs was Barrett's Privateers. And up until about 1990, you couldn't have paid me to sing. I took singing lessons. I think I took 2 hours and never sang a note. But in any case, in 1990, I decided that had to change, and I was pretty motivated then. And so I joined a choir that was forming just 3 blocks away from where I lived. I was living in a liveaboard in the harbor of Victoria. This is way back in '89. So pretty idyllic. 75 a month for moorage in the summertime and 150 in the winter. But you only had 15 amp service. And if you blew the breaker, theoretically, you'd be in shit because somebody would have to come down and unlock the box and turn it back on. But the dock or finger that I lived on was filled with renegades who never saw a rule they wouldn't love to break. So they would always figure out a way to get into it no matter what lock was on it. So this is Stan Rogers. Oh, so I joined this choir, and one of the songs we did a cappella was Barrett's Privateers. Yeah. Story about a Nova Scotian who was seduced into going along with British privateers who were basically British licensed pirates attacking the Americans. Yeah. Yeah. Here I sit on a Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers. Yeah. Okay, Northwest Passage. For just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the board seat, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and made the Northwest Passage to the sea. Westward from the Davis Strait, there was Zandt alive, a sea route to the Orient for which so many died, seeking railroad and glory, leaving weather-broken bones and a long-forgotten, lonely cairn of stones. Offered just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and make the Northwest Passage to the sea. 3 centuries thereafter, I'd take passage over land in the footsteps of great Kelso, where a sea of flowers began, watching city rise before me, then behind me sink again. This tardiest explorer driving hard across the plains, offered just one time, I would take the Northwest Passage to find the hand of Franklin reaching for the Beaufort Sea, tracing one warm line through a land so wide and savage, and made the Northwest Passage to the sea. Through the night behind the wheel, the mileage quick and west, I think upon Mackenzie, Braden, Thompson, and the rest, who crossed the mountain ramparts and did show a path for me to race the roaring Fraser to the sea. How then am I so different from the first men through this way? Like them I left a settled life, threw it all away to see the Northwest Passage at the call of many men, to find there what Find the hand of Franklin reaching for the board seat, tracing one warm knot through a land so wide and savage, and make a northwest passage to the sea. So I moved to the Maritimes from Ontario in 74, 75. And so then I started learning, you know, about all the maritime music, the wonderful grand band. I met the guy who was an integral part of that. I didn't know he was at the time. He was a musician. Excuse me. He was a musician at the time, and I knew him from a different way. But yeah, look up the wonderful grand band from Newfoundland. They did what they called rock and reel. So they took traditional jigs and reels and jacked them up with a rock beat. There was a tall, lanky electric violinist who'd play on his back and between his legs and be, you know, Jimi Hendrix. And although I didn't know it at the time, the two girls from Codco, who are on 22 Minutes, the originators of 22 Minutes. Their name escapes me, of course. But they would come on in between the band playing and do their skits. The skit I remember best is talking about Channel Number 5 perfume. Chanel Number 5, Channel Number 5. They're Maritimers, Newfoundlanders. And my girlfriend had a girlfriend there named Huina. And she grew up in a family of something like 23 kids in a 20 by 20 salt box house on the west coast of Newfoundland. They'd eat in shifts. A lot of what they'd eat would be homemade bread with molasses on it. And they'd just have piles of sandwiches on the counter. And it's a beautiful spot. You have the rough ocean. The ocean around Newfoundland is, you know, Iceberg Alley. And they have wild horses there. They're wild except for when they need them. So they lasso them in the spring when they need to plow their gardens. Then they let them go to fend for themselves. And then they catch them again when they need to haul their wood in from the woods that they've got chopped and ready. So you'd see these wild horses running along the headlands with an ocean background. And it was quite an interesting culture there because the American military base was there, filled with mostly black servicemen. So that totally changed things, you know. And Huina was a beautiful woman. She had long blonde hair. Yeah, so she'd go to the officers' club and... yeah, there you go. Yeah, so I love the Maritimes, the humor. I worked for the railroad when I got there. And of course, they're even more traditional than, you know, regular, you know, people who live in Halifax are fairly sophisticated. The women there are as attractive almost as Quebec City or Montreal. They have a real flair. Definitely more conservative than the French. But, yeah, so, and it's expensive place to live. I had to live in a place called, oh, what was it called? Oh, don't know. I couldn't afford to live in Halifax, so I lived in Spyfield. Yeah. They had a thing called a rotary, which nobody in Canada had ever heard of. It's this traffic circle like in England, you know, and there's 4 or 5, you know, streets that go into this traffic circle. So, yeah, I loved it there. Yeah, never thought I wouldn't go back. Lived for about 10 years, 7 or 8 years in Halifax. Worked for the railroad, CN. Helped to put in the container port. And then I looked after the actual track between Dartmouth, which is Halifax's twin city. Dartmouth, not Dartmouth. They know you're from away if you say Dartmouth. It's spelled Dartmouth, but it's Dartmouth. And I looked after track up to what people from away would call Musquodobois, which is what I called it, but it's actually pronounced Musquodoboit. So it was 60 kilometers of track. So I got to ride on those little putt-putt vehicles that you would see on track. So, yeah, they drank like fishes. They come in the morning just stinking like a brewery. I thought they just drank a lot the night before, but I think they just drank right straight through. Pancho and Lefty by, oh, he's a famous songwriter, much like Tom Waits and John Prine. He didn't get rich from his own recordings of the song, but many other people recorded it. So this apparently is by Emmy Lewis. Living on the road, my friend, gonna keep you free and clean. Now you wear your skin like iron. Breath as hard as kerosene. Weren't your mama's only boy, but her favorite one, it seems. She began to cry when you said goodbye. Sank into your dreams. Pancho was a bandit, boys, his horse was fast as polished steel, and he wore his gun outside his pants for all the honest world to feel. Pancho met his match, you know, on the deserts down in Mexico. Nobody heard his dying words. Oh, but that's the way it goes. All the farewell is sailing, could have had every day. They only let him slip away, out of kindness, I suppose. Lefty, he can't sing the blues all night long like he used to love. Dusty Pancho bit down south, ended up in Lefty's mouth. The day they made him for Pancho low, Lefty split for Ohio, where he got the bread to go. There ain't nobody knows. All the farewell is sailing, could have had him any day. They only let him slip away, out of kindness, I suppose. Oh, it's still a Pancho fella. Lefty's living in a cheap hotel land. Desert's quiet and Cleveland's cold, so the story ends, we're told. Pancho needs your prayers, it's true. Save a fear for Lefty too. He only did what he had to do, and now he's going home. A few great men around they say they could have had him any day. They only let him go so long, out of kindness, I suppose. A long sustain, the magic of strings in a box.